Hi guys, it's Ann again, and I decided that I would do the 20 random things you probably didn't know about me meme. I've never done one of the tags before, so I haven't done like get to know your needlework or any of those, so this will be a whole bunch of weird tidbits about me. Okay, enjoy. Tidbit number one, I am an introvert, off the charts introvert. And most people, when they meet me, assume the opposite. And all I can say is that I take after my dad, who is extremely introverted as well. We need a lot of inside our own heads time. My husband calls me the hermit. That's probably a pretty true assessment. But I have a mom who is extremely off the charts extroverted. And so I think it's a nurture nature thing where, well, I take after my dad, and I always say if something had happened to my mom when I was a little kid, my dad and I would still be sitting at the dining room table across from each other with books propped up, you know, reading while we ate our TV dinners, and both of us probably totally content, but my mom is the reason that most people think I'm an extrovert, even though I am a very, very introverted person. I can do extrovert. I just am not programmed that way. Number two, I am a morning person. I used to be able to stay up, you know, late and work in the evenings, and now I cannot. I haven't been able to do that since college, just after college. I normally do get up pretty early. Long ago, not even that long ago, several years ago, I was still working shift work, and I worked online. So even when we moved from the East Coast out here to New Mexico, I was still working first shift, which means that instead of starting my day at 7 a.m. here in Mountain Time, I was starting my day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, which is 5 a.m. Mountain Time. I like it. I like to get stuff done. I like to kind of get my day started, get the work off my plate, and then, granted, I'm useless after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'm a morning person. I also had horses, which we'll get to as another one of my little mini things, and they were early risers, and no matter what the daylight was actually like, my horse Ben, 5:30 every morning, whether it was daylight savings time or not, he was outside rearranging the buckets and ready to be fed. So even though I no longer have horses, and even though I'm no longer doing shift work, first shift, I still get up and get started really early in the day. So morning person all the way. I am also a cat person. We have dogs. I like dogs, but I am a cat person. I have had 3 cats in my entire life. The first one lived to be in her early 20s. The second one, even though she developed renal failure around age 14, she lived to be 19. And my current cat, Emma, is 12, and I hope I have her another 10 years. She is one of my best friends, and she's hanging out right over there. So I don't dislike dogs at all, so don't get me wrong. It's just I think I am more of a personality match for cats. I also got bitten by a dog in the face when I was a kid. I don't really remember it. I was like 3. My parents had a next door neighbor who had a dog who came into our yard, dug under the fence, and attacked me. And so I don't know, maybe I have some kind of, you know, subconscious thing about dogs. I don't like dogs that push into my personal space. I know I don't like that. But I like dogs. They're chipper. They're cheerful. Like I said, we have 2. My husband is a dog person. So we will probably always have dogs. And I love our animals. You know, they all have individual personalities. So take the good ones. And hopefully that's what you have living in your house as your companions. I was a really weird sleeper when I was a kid. I honestly am shocked that my parents had another child. I'm the eldest. I slept like 2 hours a day total. I have no idea how my mom went back to work 6 weeks after I came along. Other than that, I do know that she used to put me in a playpen and turn the television on, and I would just sit in the playpen or lay in the playpen, and she would sleep on the couch next to me. That went on until I was about 6. And even after that, I was not someone who required a lot of sleep until I was in my mid-20s. So, along with being a weird sleeper, I was also a weird eater. I had one year where I think I ate 3 things. And if we didn't have those to eat, I didn't eat anything because it just wasn't that important to me to eat. So my parents tried the whole, you know, put the plate of food in front of the child, make the child sit there until they eat it. Okay, I'll sit here as long as you want, but I'm not going to eat it. I think I was kind of a really not so great child in many respects, but hey, I'm still here. My parents, you know, didn't give me away to the fairies in the middle of the night. So yeah, my 3 things were bread and butter, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and grilled cheese. And I would drink milk. So, you know, I'd like to say that I had no particularly long-term side effects of that particular menu for an entire year, but that was the year between 3 and 4, or 4 and 5, right in there. Yeah. Let's see. I have moved 25 times in my lifetime, not counting moves like in and out of college dorms, but actual places of residence. We moved a ton when I was a kid. About every 18 months. I hate moving. I think I'm really good at it because I kind of pare down to essentials because that was the deal. When I was a kid, you kind of had, you know, you could have your box of important things and then that was it. So you had to figure out what was important to you to keep or not keep. So this house that we've lived in since we've moved to New Mexico, which I think I mentioned at some other point, we've been here almost 9 years. Just over 9 years, excuse me. This is the longest I've ever lived in one place. So kind of a record, and I'm happy about that. Let's see. Places that I visited. I have been to, I think it's about 3/4 of the states in the United States. I have been to Tokyo. I have been to Scotland. I have been to Ireland. And I know it's the United States, but I have been to Hawaii as well, which, you know, is not part of the contiguous states. I would really, really like to go to England. I have a lot of museums I'd like to see in London. And I would like to see Tuscany, and I would like to see Paris and the French countryside. So someday I'll put that on my bucket list of places that I'd like to visit. Let's see. I am someone who is multi-craftual. I knit, I spin, hand spin yarn, I do some quilting, I used to weave, I do cross stitch and embroidery, obviously, I do sewing. I know how to crochet, but it is very, very minimal, and likely I will never get any better at it than I am currently, which is to say, not very good at all. My favorite place in the entire world is northern Vermont. We lived in northern Vermont for 3.5 years. We were 50 miles south of the Canadian border. When we first were looking to move up there and we're driving around looking for places to live, we got out of the car and for some reason it smelled like home. I can't even describe what that is to you. And certainly I moved around enough when I was a kid. I don't know what that smells like, but we got out of the car in July and the place that we were, I was like, this smells like home. And we wound up buying a house there. We had 40 acres of pasture land with old apple trees. We had a river, a little creek running through it, and there's a beaver pond in the back part of our property. It was gorgeous, and if the area had any kind of way to make a living, we would probably still be living there. Let's see. So I mentioned that I used to have horses. I started riding when I was a little kid. I was, you know, toddler age. My grandparents had horses, and we had the Shetland pony, and then we had bigger horses to ride. So I grew up knowing how to ride horses, and when we moved out west, we had enough space, property, that we were able to get horses, and it was one of those things that my husband used as kind of a carrot. He said, you know, if we move out west, for me to take this job, you can get a horse. And I was like, okay, well, there you go. I love horses. I have always loved horses. I just think they're some of the world's most wonderful beasts. So as an adult, I had three, let's say 2.5 horses. My first adult horse was named Digger. He was a Missouri Foxtrotter, which means he's a gaited horse. They don't actually trot. They have a syncopated gait that is very comfortable to ride, and so you can go for long stretches of time with them in this gait. He was a gorgeous Palomino and super, super smart. Probably too smart for his own good, but at any rate, I taught him all kinds of great things, and one of the other little tidbits is I taught him Elvish. I taught him voice commands in Elvish, and I gave him an Elvish name phonetically from the Lord of the Rings dictionary, because I am that kind of a Lord of the Rings geek. So he knew a whole bunch of commands, like when to canter, when to trot, when to walk, when to step over things, when to side pass, all kinds of stuff. He knew those in English, and he knew those in Elvish, which probably was not necessarily a selling point. I had him until he was 8. I did all of his, you know, starter training, and around that time I became interested in long distance endurance racing. And while he was an excellent mountain horse and good for a whole bunch of wonderful things, that he was just totally fearless, he did not have great metabolics to do endurance. And so I wound up selling him to a good friend who lives just south of us. She still has him. He's 13 this year, and she still rides him all the time, so he and Judy have their own fun life together. My second horse was my Arabian, Ben, that I rode endurance with, and who I have mentioned before. He was an awesome horse. He was a good partner. He and I did tons and tons and tons of miles. If you've seen the movie Hidalgo, that's kind of endurance riding. Kind of. Not exactly. Endurance riding is an organized sport. You have vet checks. You don't just let the horse run themselves into the ground. That's the whole point of it. You have to be very good at strategy in terms of coming in to vet checks. You have to be down at your horse has to be at a certain pulse level, respiration level, all of that. They have to be fit to continue. If you think hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, you have not seen a vet at an endurance ride where you have done something stupid with your horse. I never worried about Ben. He was always really sensible, as part of the reason I got him. Yeah, he was my buddy. He was my longtime go-to guy. I did all kinds of stuff with him. We rode all over the Mountain West region, and I miss him every day. And then the other horse that we owned was not technically my horse, but it was my husband's horse. He was a big half Morgan, half Arab, which you would think would not be a big horse if you know anything about horse breeds, but Sam was massive. He was massive. He was like the fairy tale charger, all white and just huge. Perfect size for my husband and his long legs. I had trouble riding him, but as far as Sam was concerned, he and I dated. That was what he thought our relationship was. He was the sweetest personality ever. And the best work ethic I have ever met anybody, equine, person, dog, whatever. We won't count cats because they have their own measure of work. So maybe one of my other videos I'll pull out some pictures of Sam and Ben and Digger and show you guys. They were the light of my life. We miss them, but it is hard to take care of horses on a small-ish acreage that you can't grow grass on because we live in the high desert. So when we moved here after Ben and Sam passed away, we have not gotten new horses to keep. So there's those. I am a published author. I have had several things published in magazines, and I also have a published book, which you may or may not have interest in, but there it is. You can find it on Amazon if you know where to look. I have kind of an eclectic taste in music. I like all kinds of things. I have 12 years of piano lessons under my belt, which I don't use at all, but took those lessons. So I like everything from classical to, I like some country, I like bluegrass, I like folk, I like some rock and roll, I like a lot of kinds of music. I had one entire year that was a really stressful job year where I used to have to go into the office at 4:30 in the morning, to be at the office at 4:30 in the morning, and that entire year I knew how long it took me to drive from my house to the office. I would listen to nothing but Zeppelin. I listened to Led Zeppelin for an entire year, and every day when I would pull into the parking lot, I would listen to When the Levee Breaks before I would gear up to go into my office and deal with crazy physicians on the phone at 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. I have 3 degrees. I have one in clothing / costume design. I have one in early American history, colonial period through 1812, and then I have a master's degree in American history from colonial period through 1812. And I wrote a 200-page thesis on taverns in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah, there you go. And I use that every single day. I do. Not at all. Okay, so I think I've mentioned before that one of the things that I have done in my life is I worked for both Colonial Williamsburg and the Valentine Museum in Richmond, Virginia. I worked in the historic clothing and textile departments of those 2 museums. Those were the 2 best jobs of my entire life. I had a blast. If budget cuts had not reared their ugly head, I would still be at the Valentine, still enjoying that. It was just a fascinating job. It pushed all of my geek buttons and all of my kind of OCD catalog buttons. I loved everything that I did there. The collection at the Valentine is, I believe, the 3rd largest in the nation, and no one ever sees it because it's a small social history in downtown Richmond. But if you have a chance to go to Richmond, hit them up. It's a fantastic collection. They have things like the dress that Washington's mother wore to his inauguration. They have the boots that Robert E. Lee wore as a cadet when he was at West Point. They have amazing fashions from the late 18th century. They have an embroidered buckskin coat from, I think it's the 1780s, if I remember my dates correctly. They have shoes, they have quilts, they have samplers. Their sampler collection is amazing. They have hats, they have corsets, they have knitted pieces, they have Worth dresses. It's just, I could go on and on and on. I love that job. Many days I think fondly of it. Before I worked for the museums, this is even before I finished college, while I was still in high school and then in college, I worked for a theater in the Boston area, and we were fortunate enough to have off-Broadway shows come in, so I've worked with some awesome they were up and coming at the time. I have since seen lots of them on TV programs and things like that. That was an interesting experience. I worked as a personal dresser where I would dress members of the cast and take care of their costumes and do all of the laundrying in between. And then Sunday nights we usually had other acts in from New York. So I've worked with folks like the Everly Brothers. I've worked with Jerry Lee Lewis. I've worked with Jay Leno. And I've worked with folks like Barbara Cook, who, if you don't know who she is an amazing, amazing performer who created the roles that everybody thinks about Shirley Jones in. So like she was in the original Oklahoma on Broadway. She was in the original Carousel. I believe she did Showboat. Just a gorgeous voice and an absolutely lovely woman. I can't speak highly enough of her. She's a total professional. So really enjoyed hanging out with her. I think that's coming to the end. I will say my last two bits on a personal kind of thing. Some of you may know this, but a lot of you don't, I'm sure. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease at the age of 24. I had been sick for about 1.5 years and, couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And in hindsight, it turns out that I probably had prodromal symptoms that were going to trigger to an autoimmune disease. In my high school years, they thought I had rheumatoid arthritis when I was in high school, and they tested me for it because I used to wake up with swollen joints and pains, and my legs would hurt, and it was just growing pains. I never tested positive for anything then, and it wasn't until my early 20s that stuff converted and they were actually able to find it on test results. And so I was very sick for a number of years, to the point that, sorry about that drop frame, that always seems to happen. Anyway, I was talking about the fact that in my early 20s I was very sick. Couldn't leave my house, wasn't doing well, didn't have a whole lot of choices on my meds. My doctor had said that I should just, try to wait it out till some other ones came on the market, and once those finally did, that made a huge difference. It took me several years to kind of get stabilized, but eventually they found something that worked, and so over the last 20 years I've been on various and sundry not so fun medications. The one I've been on the last 10 years, 12 years almost, has been really great. It's made the biggest difference in my life. I have to go and get hooked up to an IV and have a drug that used to be used for leukemia patients as a chemotherapy drug, but which they use for other things now, run through. And so every 7 or 8 weeks I go and have that system flush, basically. I get to go and have that run in, and then I come home and crash for a few days. But otherwise I'm mostly good. And one of the things that's made a huge difference in my life has been a very strange diet, which basically has no carbohydrates in it whatsoever. It's things like, obviously no breads, but it's no wheat, no glutens, no potatoes, no rice, no corn, no refined sugars, nothing like maple syrup. I can't remember if I just said potatoes or not, but all of the foods that I like and that are comfort foods are no longer on the dietary list. So while that's been kind of a huge lifestyle modification, and it makes going out to eat kind of tough because corn syrup is in almost everything, and thickeners are in almost everything, which are usually like a potato starch or a xanthan gum or something like that, which none of which I can have. It has, however, made me in much better shape than I was with the crazy drug regimen before. So I try to be diligent about that. I can coast a little bit now that I've been on this diet for 3.5 years. But I just have to be really careful with it. So anyway, I tossed that out. If you're somebody who has chronic autoimmune issues and you want me to tell you more about it, please feel free to shoot me a quick note and I'll be glad to give you more specifics about it. Obviously, it doesn't apply to a lot of people, so it's not necessarily helpful. But I will say that it has been a huge game changer in my life. I have been able to avoid a lot of emergency hospital visits. I have been able to avoid having major surgical procedures for the most part. I've been able to do pretty much everything I want to do with my life. And, you know, I'm somebody who believes firmly in the precept that you should live every day to the absolute fullest that you can, do the things that you love to do, spend time with the people who give you great joy, people and animals, and, you know, try to kind of do the best you can with what you've got. So, on that note, I think that is at least 25 things about me, kind of all cobbled together. You know, as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, please leave me a note below. I will be glad to try to get back to you with an answer or just a quick response. And hope you guys have enjoyed this. So until next time I talk to you, take care.